Welcome back to Inspired or Acquired. This is the podcast where we interview real business owners, talk real numbers, give them a valuation, and ask them whether or not they would sell their business. So we have a fun one today. Jameson Haslam is joining us from San Diego, California. He is the founder and owner of West Coast Decks. He's an amazing follow on social media. If you don't follow him, they do some beautiful work out there on the West Coast. And we're excited to have him. And as always, I'm joined by Clint Fiore, business broker out of Texas. So, Jameson, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I feel like I don't exactly belong, but happy to be here.
Of course you do. So, for folks that don't know, tell us the background of how you ended up doing what you're doing now and what you did before, because I think it makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah. I need to get better at telling the story. So I have sort of cut from central casting, like banking, private equity, like Wall Street, Ivy League background. I did my undergrad at Stanford. I worked at Morgan Stanley out of undergrad, did a stint at Google, worked at a couple of startups out in the Valley, then moved to Boston to work at Bain Capital, the buyout firm. From Bain, I made my way back out west, and I worked for a regional real estate developer out of Salt Lake doing ground up multifamily and select service hospitality. In 2019, I hopped on the call it Airbnb arbitrage bandwagon, and a friend and I launched one of these little sort of arbitrage models like Sonder, or one of those big companies that are now no longer, they're still with us, but in a different incarnation. Most of them failed completely. Our venture likewise crashed and burned quite painfully with COVID. Moved back home to San Diego, which is where I grew up, where my roots are, and I started a decking contracting business. So West Coast Deck is the business. We install anything and everything that has to do with decking. So your composite decks, Trex, TimberTech type decking, hardwood decking. We do a lot of waterproof decking. I'll talk about sort of growth verticals and what's helped us get here. We're in year 3. I know you guys like to talk about like revenue numbers and where things go. And I sort of went back and looked at financials so we're 2.5 years in, but I sort of have like year end for 3 years, like looking forward. And we did like 600 in year 1, like 800 in year 2. And I think we'll track to we'll see. There's a couple of like big numbers that are hanging out there year end, but we'll hit either like 1.2 or 1.4. So
nice.
That's about like a 35% CAGR, depending on how you do math. And when I started, I was like, wow, I don't know if this will go anywhere, but I think that, you just kind of keep chopping wood. And if we can if we stay above a 25% growth rate year over year, we'll get to a good place. There's a couple of comps I look at. There's a large decking contractor in Los Angeles, LA Decks. And they do around, I think, 7 million top line. There's a business out of Portland who I try to model a lot of what I do after, called Cascade Fence and Deck. 90% of their revenue is decking, and they're at around a 12 or $13 million top line number.
Wow.
So that's kind of where we're tracking to eventually. But it's definitely not, I think I always laugh when we see on Twitter or social media, like, oh, get, $1 million, like, whatever, small business. And like, when you get to $1 million, you're like, as the owner, you're paying yourself like 60 grand, right? That sounds like a glamorous number, but it's slim pickings, I think, where we are, until you like break 3 million, and then you can start, maybe taking a little bit more home. But that's my path to get here.
So out of all the things, how'd you end up on decking?
There's a very circuitous answer to that. But I think that once I landed on wanting to do something construction related or trades related, I wanted a segment that had a what I call like the a good ratio between like average order value size and job complexity. So the worst ratio of like orders, the worst kind of, if that is a financial metric, which it's not, I just made it up, but the worst score on that spectrum would be like a custom home builder where you have literally thousands of decisions and specs for a given project, and maybe your job value is like $2 or $3 million. Ours is, our average job size is like 30 to 40 grand, and there's 2 or 3 selections that are part of the project, right? You've got shape of your deck, you've got type of decking, and you've got type of railing. So it's this really nice balance of relatively large job size and, de minimis decision making from the client. So it's fewer things for us to screw up. We still manage to screw plenty of things up, but it's this good balance between like job size and simplicity. I think fencing paradoxically is not the right word, but like fencing is another business that is a good balance between like job size and decision making. It's like one decision, what type of fencing, and then your job size based on kind of linear feet. I really like the outcome. You either nail it or you don't, and you're like the sort of probability that you're going to mess things up increase every kind of variable you add. So decking is also
that is profound what you just said, by the way, because I had 2 old consulting clients, and they were both in the cabinetry business. But one of them was like high-end custom, and then the other one was like a franchise where you like rip off the cabinets, paint them, put them back on. And it was so much simpler, and they made so much more money than the custom one. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said. And I would not have your job size was that big, and that there are only 3 decision points on most jobs.
The other thing that's nice about what we do relative to maybe say like a fencing contractor or like a painting contractor is there is a level of complexity in the execution that does scare people away. So there's not a moat in the sense that like every general contractor can, or like good carpenter can build a deck. I would never pretend to be like something unique or special, but the jobs do get complex enough in the sense of execution risk that it does scare away some of the kind of chuck in the truck type contractors, as well as gives clients pause enough to say like, I'm not going to pay Jimmy the handyman to do this thing that is like a 2nd-story balcony that if he screws it up, like I might actually die, like falling off of the balcony. So, I like those dynamics. There's still tons of competition. There's still, plenty of opportunity to like mess things up. But those are 2 things that going into this process were important to me. I also looked at, so we started in 2022. So we were kind of in the, and I didn't buy this business. I started it. So, be a little bit different, the calculus there, but I could see that there was sort of this, wave of dollars that had moved from like consumer discretionary spending on travel and other stuff that was being spent on like home renovations, and sort of like pulled forward all this spend on home stuff. And particularly here in sort of coastal California, where you can literally be outside 360 days a year, a ton of spend on your yard, right? Outdoor living is the category that like Wall Street would call it. And outdoor living spend exploded. So like pools, hardscapes, patios, and then decks as like a subsegment of that world. So when I launched, there was just a ton of demand. We just basically captured a small slice of this massive demand pool that was like being spent. So there was some calculus that went into it. Some of it was just like, and this is maybe a more honest story, which is like, I helped a friend build a deck in his backyard. It went really well. I had a fun time. I said, wow, what would a business look like doing that? We construct these stories with numbers to kind of validate our emotional decision making. But yeah, that's sorry. One of my framers is texting me. So I gotta, this is my life. Yeah. So I don't know, like, can I provide any more detail around that? That's kind of the how we got started story. I also get these questions online of like, wow, like what, like, why did you switch from like, the ultimate like white shoe investing kind of world to, and I'm kind of like, maybe I'm a little crazy. Like, I think that's, there's a piece to it, right? Of these small business owners that were like, you sign up for a lot of suffering and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but, I think there is something to that as well.
Hey guys, wanted to take a quick break from the show just to tell you about our companies for a second. I'm Patrick Dichter and I own Apple Tree Business Services. We do quality accounting and tax nationwide. So if you're running a business or looking to buy a business, we'd love to help you out with accounting and tax services. You can find us at appletreebusiness.com. And Clint, tell us about Bison Business.
Yeah, Bison Business is my firm. We do nationwide M&A. So we help people buy and sell companies. Most of our customers have companies in the 1 to 20 million revenue range, profitable businesses. So if you've got one and you're ready to get acquired, you can reach out to us at bisonbusiness.com for a complimentary evaluation. We can get you to market and get you sold. If you're a listener that's a buyer that wants to buy a company that size, make sure you're on our email list because we'll send you out deals first before they hit the market anywhere else. But we'd love to serve you anytime you're thinking of acquiring or selling your business. We want to be your first stop at Bison Business.
Awesome. Now back to the show. So you were saying people will joke with you on Twitter that you were like in the most ideal, white collar world. Why switch, right?
Yeah. I kind of joke back and I'm like, oh, I have like a screw loose. And so I had to do something that like involved screwing in lumber or whatever. But I mean, I think that I felt and I was in very junior roles, and for most, as one is, right, when you kind of work your way up through the ranks, and I often felt like my job was sending email, which feels very derivative, and this is about as hands-on as it gets. So, it's crazy and challenging and hard, but I really enjoy myself. And, most days, there are days that you spend in the field position, figuring out how to deal with the stress, but most of the time I am enjoying myself. So,
well, man, I get it. I've always been attracted to this space and it sometimes makes no sense, but I feel you, man. I would love to do our favorite activity on this show, which is kind of jump into a quick ballpark valuation and try to figure out, you just started this thing from scratch, built a deck for a friend, decided let's make a business out of this thing. And here you are, 2.5 years in, you're now north of $1 million in revenue. I'd love to just kind of roughly estimate kind of where value could be today. And then we can use that as a jumping off point for that conversation. So, you said you were running towards 1.3 or so in sales this year?
Yeah, we'll hit that. We could do north of it, but yeah.
Okay. About how much of that has flown to the bottom line for you?
We could have done sort of 20, 25%, but I'm putting like 100% of everything back into growth. So that's, buying trucks and equipment, investing in marketing. There's a lot of, when you start from zero, there's a lot of, I don't know exactly what the term is, but just sort of like deferred maintenance, in the sense that it's like you forego investing in things that will allow you to have like durable processes on an ongoing basis, whether that's headcount, whether that's literal physical space, whether it's trucks, whether it's technology and things like that. So I literally take 100% of everything I possibly can and put it back into what we're doing. So I think the way that I think about valuation is, project-based revenue is tough. I think that it is, if you can demonstrate that project-based revenue is repeatable and you have a playbook or a flywheel for customer acquisition, and you can put a number on that and show that it's consistent and durable, then project-based revenue is actually really nice. It's big. They're real dollars. the way that I think about what we're doing and, starting from zero was, I and I'll talk about this in a second, but I think there are kind of recurring revenue adjacencies and more kind of repeatable revenue opportunities that you wouldn't classify necessarily as like contractually guaranteed recurring revenue, like a SaaS business, but are similar. But, nailing the homeowner one-time purchase buyer that is highly profitable, that is like a 50+% gross margin, that gives us dollars that we can then invest in these other areas that are maybe sort of, take a longer payback period on the front end, but can invest there. We've sort of discovered verticals within our space that are more repeatable. One of those is like commercial and like architectural waterproof coatings. So if you've got like waterproof decking, or like a concrete cementitious coating in a commercial property, like a hotel or like any kind of like commercial real estate, residential as well, you're redoing those coatings every, 5 years. And so we've, in the last year, tapped into that business, and it's been like a big growth vertical for us. And that there are established players in that space that are a lot bigger, where you can say, look, we've established ourselves in like San Diego and Orange County as like this preeminent like waterproofing subcontractor to these GCs, or directly working with owners. And that's, you can look at that business and say, hey, this portion of our P&L is that, and that's pretty repeatable. And, we have a few relationships with GCs there where, we get calls from them every week, like, hey, this project's ready, go bang it out. And it's a 10-second conversation, sales conversation, literally, and we go service it. And, we really like that revenue. I think we've also figured out how to really nail the homeowner client acquisition pipeline. And I think that were I to look to sell this business at some future date, I could demonstrate to a buyer, not even necessarily in the hope of trying to like boost my valuation, but I would want the next owner of this business, or whoever is kind of sitting in my shoes, to do a good job. Like, I would never want to pass something on, or just for their own sake, right? I wouldn't want to give them something that is going to like be miserable. And so I would want to be able to give them a playbook and say, look, you spend these dollars on, paid client acquisition, you do this, and that will convert to this revenue at this level. And I think we're not too far away from being able to do that.
I think about it the same way. I think you're thinking about it the right way. I've sold many companies that have project-based revenue, and they are sellable. You don't typically get the same multiples as the recurring revenue businesses, but that's the two things, if you can have good answers for, is like, how do I acquire customers? And I want to make sure it's not just relationships with Jameson that are bringing on all these customers.
Right.
Like, how do you do marketing? How do you do customer acquisition? If you have a playbook for that, levers you can pull there, and then you have a team that can reliably fulfill the work. And so if you've got those two pieces, kind of the sales and marketing piece and the fulfillment piece, then you can create a sellable business from the project-based business. That does happen every day. They are sellable. Just my like really rough estimate, coming from starting from zero value, wasn't a thing just a few years ago, to where you're at today. I mean, we'd have to look at the financials and do some probably creative add backs to figure out, some of these expenses that were just for future growth versus necessary expenses to fulfill the work that you did the past few years. And so after a little bit of massaging on a financial recast, we might be able to come up with, $150,000, $200,000 of what we call SDE, or seller's discretionary earnings, in your business, I would guess. And if not a little more. And at your size and with the project-based revenue and decking, I'd expect like maybe about a 2x of that. So we might be 400, 500,000 of business value if you were to just grab a local San Diego business broker and say, hey, this was really fun. I've built a nice thing, but I have this other opportunity I want to do over here. Can we package this thing up and sell it, they go through that recast process with you, try to find someone that wants to fill your shoes and kind of take it from here, and can probably get you that sort of payout. So I think there's some value there right now. Nothing super wild yet, but I wanted to say that in an encouraging way, because there is real value already, and it is growing rapidly. And these other companies you're looking up to, that you're following that growth rate and want to be like if you keep that 25-30% growth rate going, and you put up 3 to 5 more years like that, you may be well over the $1 million valuation, if not $2 million valuation, for West Coast X, and so you're on your way to having a pretty serious asset here. And then, like you said, once you cross over that 3 million and up range, you might even be making some great money along the way, and be really able to enjoy the lifestyle that you're laying the foundation of right now. So when I just walked through those numbers, you didn't seem real surprised by that. Like, that seems like, is that about what about this space? Is that matching?
Yeah, I again come from a world of sort of understanding what businesses are worth, and I think that the challenging thing at our size is you need a really, and I'm not saying I am amazing, but you need somebody who is really talented, who can come in and step in to make it work. That is really creative with marketing, can also do project management really well, can manage the ops piece, and that's a hard buy. I would never sell. Let's say it's Clint, let's take this to market. We're gonna 400 grand is a fair number. I wouldn't sell it to somebody for 400 grand, even though to me that's sort of not a very big number, unless I knew that it was going to be a going concern for that person. And I think it would have to be the right operator to be that case. It's just a really challenging size, right? I think, again, 2 years from now, we'd have a few more key roles in place, and that gives you the leeway, candidly, to have a less talented leader.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just harder to screw up, right? Whereas, where we are sort of sub $1 million in SDE, or whatever you want to call it, or sub 500 grand in SDE, it's just, there's not a lot of room for mistakes.
Yeah, but I've done those types of deals, and there are those guys out there that are they're sick and tired of their job. They've built decks. They've got people skills. They're like, what? I don't want to start from zero. I'd rather, you've already crossed the $1 million threshold, which is, I think, something like only 5% of small business startups ever even hit $1 million in revenue. And so, you've done that in the first few years, and that gives a huge head start for someone that wants to enter this space versus coming from scratch. And you've got a good brand name, and you've got great Google reviews, and there's something there for someone that's wanting to enter this space. You could provide them that kind of moving start, that head start.
For sure. I mean, I think that we have probably about $200,000 in weekly inbound lead volume of jobs that, so obviously not all of those are closable business, but I think that for me, if I were looking at evaluating a business, that is a very real asset, because I can say wow, there's measurable lead flow here that I can then just service basically and grow on that base. So it took a lot of really, we're pretty good at marketing. We're not the world's best, but I think we're better than 95 out of 100 contractors. And our lead volume now kind of reflects that. So there's a lot of there's real value there for sure.
So when we're talking about this conversation about valuation and exit, did you get into this thinking I'm going to build this up to sell it, or were you thinking this is going to be a long-term lifestyle play for me, or how do you think about that do I sell, do I not conversation?
Yeah, I think you have to understand is so I my the, I'm 39. I've had, call it like 20 years of professional experience at this point. I have a really good sense for like what makes me tick, what I'm good at, and what I want to do. And I really love work. So, my sort of game plan for myself is like, I'm going to work until I die. Like, I'm not super motivated by leisure. I'm not super motivated by even necessarily like nice things, but I really love creation and like creation in sort of like a business context. And so, the game plan for me is sort of build a revenue base that then allows me to pursue, if this is like step 5 in my journey, businesses 6, 7, and 8, and those could be, regional expansion for West Coast Stack. It could be us going after LA and then San Francisco and, Portland, right? Or it could be, launching a parallel but adjacent business and really going after, for example, like the architectural coatings. I have a sense for what those things look like, but the goal with this business is to just sort of build a revenue base that then allows us to take, other small bets that might be faster growing or more profitable or more, better businesses, for lack of a better term. For me, when I was looking to do this in 2022, it was actually the type of business that allowed me to, we did like we did 30 or 35 grand revenue in our first month of operation, and then like 50 the month after that. And so it was kind of like, it was the kind of thing that out the gate, there was real dollars there. And for me, there's value in that, in the sense that like allows me to build a base. I can then grow that, and then I can go and do maybe not necessarily higher risk ventures, but things that maybe take longer to incubate, and do that, from a seat where, I'm not doing a side hustle while working for, Morgan Stanley or something, right? It's like, it's all inside of my own P&L. So that's kind of my game plan. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's great.
What size do you think you need to be at before you like add a new service line or
we're already
go after other markets or
right? We're already, check back in a year, because some of these things we're already there. So we're sort of, you need to be careful not just an entrepreneur, but any person, but right, that it's not like shiny object syndrome where you're sort of like chasing all these different things.
Right.
I am very calculated in the sense of like every day I'm thinking through new opportunities, but I do it in the context of, what is accretive to what I'm already doing, what's not going to be too much of a distraction to like where it cuts into the profitability of this. And so are there things that would be, mutually beneficial adjacencies that we could go after? And we've already been working on some stuff, and you'll if you follow me on social media, you'll see, maybe not under the kind of West Coast Tech brand, but under some of what we do. Soon, I can give you like a very simple example of that. So where we and I think this is pretty normal, where as a business owner, you look at some of the things either that you consume or that you do, and you sort of think like, hey, could this be a separate revenue opportunity, right? And one of the things that we do really, really well is the front end sales piece. So when I get a lead, our speed to lead is like 15 minutes for initial contact, and our speed to proposal to the client is typically like 24 to 48 hours. And that's like a fully baked proposal.
Nice.
It's pricing. It's oftentimes like a full render and design. And we've gotten really, really good at that. And so our win rate on projects, assuming the client has budget, right? Because that's not always the case. And we don't spend on the full marketing package unless we've done a really good job at qualifying them. But our win rate is really high. So we've kind of invested in developing this resource that we can then kind of like package and using our existing staff, like give to other contractors in other markets. So we're going to start, we've already been testing that, and we'll kind of start rolling that out soon. That's kind of an example of like, maybe a higher quality revenue item versus like, anybody who has done like project-based revenue, B2C project-based revenue, like it is a grind, like it is a battle. You've got clients that are like, oh, why is this screw like this? Why did you install this screw like this? And it's like, lady, like that's just how it goes, but then like B2C is like so hard, right?
Yeah.
So we'll start
how many team members do you have now?
We have 5 full-time field staff, so carpenters, and then we have another 4 team members that sit in Latin America. So finance, design, project management. They're equally contributing members of the team, but they don't sit here in San Diego.
Yeah, awesome. And then the 5 local ones, they're your main like installers, or do you have any subs as well?
We use subs. It's challenging in California, from a compliance perspective, and also from a quality control perspective, but it can be done. What I have discovered through painful experience is that like, as you have different project types, so and largely segmented by size, like we've got projects that are, 5 to 10 grand projects, bread and butter projects that are like 30. And then we do some that are like, 150 to 200 that are like full, really complicated decks. And you use different resources for those different project types. And oftentimes it makes sense to structure your internal team just to service one project type. And then the others you might project manage, but bring in subs to do components of them. And I've found that to work pretty well.
Got it. What's the bottleneck from doing like, I don't know, 3-4 million next year?
I ask myself that question every day. The real honest answer is the bottleneck changes every week, right? Every business owner knows this. It's sort of like whack-a-mole, right? Is if you've got your, marketing, sales, fulfillment, it's all different. I think right now it's probably fulfillment. But then, once fulfillment moves a little bit faster, it becomes sales. So, a big bottleneck for me right now is, I am the principal sales rep. And so, figuring out ways to, supplement sales talent. And, it's interesting because at our size, you can't go out and find a rep that you'd pay, 150 grand. That is probably what somebody with like the way that I sell, that's probably what they would be worth in the market.
Right.
We just can't afford that. So the way that I'm trying to, kind of in like a Moneyball style, where you, instead of replacing Jason Jambi, we're sort of like looking at the different components, is like, okay, can we use global talent to do like appointment setting and like SDR on the front end and screening and, maybe somebody else does the initial site visit and then Jameson is managing the closing process. So we're trying to do that on our way to being able to afford like a different type of sales rep. So that's how we kind of think about those things. And then, then we'll add, on the fulfillment side, a project manager who is a talented carpenter who can also like problem solve and do all of the quality control. But it's whack-a-mole. It really is. Like you sort of like are always managing these different.
So right now you wear PM and.
Yeah, I don't do any site work. So my social media videos sometimes make it seem like I am picking up tools, but
well, the truth comes out.
Yeah. So I sort of look, I'm willing to, I jokingly like on the screen put like chief janitor because I do every day clean up on sites, right?
No. Yeah.
Go visit the guys, I pick up a broom or a blower and I'm doing cleaning. And, I'll unload stuff and like I do a lot of deliveries and things like that. But I kind of look at it as like a planning failure if I have to be the one using a saw, but I can. It took a while for us to get there, right? Like, I think it's a big jump for somebody who's on the tools to like get completely off the tools.
Yeah.
And I always knew that was the path. I think with a lot of like project based or like contractor $sub-million, it's like, they start on the tools or they grow up in the trade, and it's like, how do you transition from that to do something else? Maybe it was a little bit easier for me because I didn't come from this world. And so I always knew that, not that I don't love it. Like, I think building stuff is so fun, but sort of more of a, like, just what does a good business look like? It's, how quickly can I get off the tools? And it took me about 18 months to not be doing site work every day.
We were talking before the show of just some of the ranges that these businesses can be in, where like $1 million in revenue or $1.5 million, you can run it really lean and make good money, but you wear all the hats. Or the next level is like get it to 3 to 5 million, where you've got a little bit of a leadership team and, money starts falling to the bottom line again. And then after that, you probably have to push to 8 to 10, but you don't want to get caught in between those stages. Like the guy stuck at like 2.5 million is probably like, I'm more stressed and making less money than I made when I was smaller. So it sounds like you've got a good plan to like push through that plateau to that $3 to $5 million band.
Yeah. One of the things that I've done is like, you could do this with anything in life. It's just like find somebody who's been there before and like look at their path, and, or like, find a business that's at 3 million, find a business that's at 5, and find the business at 10, and just look at their org chart and cost structure and sort of think through sequencing of like, what do I have to do? And in most industries, there's going to be like some paid mentor. I don't want to call it like a paid mentor, but like there's going to be programs where you can like buy that stuff, right? And it's going to cost a few $1,000s, which is like really valuable, right? So for me, I can look at, there's a bunch off the top of my head, different of these, models where you just say like, hey, I want to buy this. I might not do it exactly how you say, but that shows me kind of at these different revenue verticals, like, or different revenue milestones, like what different
Are you paying for a mentor within the industry?
I haven't yet, but I'm looking at a couple, and then I, have a bunch of people that I just pick their brains for free. And, people tend to be very like generous and open, especially if they're not in your like immediate local market. And this world that like, the world of sort of like Instagram and social is like pretty incredible. Like you can find a contractor who's just like you in another market and say like, hey, let's just completely open the kimono and like share everything with each other because we're not competitive at all. And that's hugely helpful.
Agree. I feel like we're catching you at an interesting time. I think you're going to end up growing faster than 25%, or this other offering that you have to other contractors might take on.
I hope so. Otherwise my hair is going to fall out. I'm having a great time. I think that, you do find yourself in situations with a small, look, everybody says this, small businesses are not small businesses for you because they want to be, right? Like we are small because we have so many constraints, right? Like it's just really, there's just a ton of constraints. And like, it's been incredibly, look, I've had incredible professional experiences, right? Like I went to Stanford, I, worked at the very best firms. Having these constraints around me has forced me to develop in a way that I've never approximated before, right? It's one thing to, read the textbook. It's another thing to be in the lab, sort of like doing the experiments. And so, the professional growth that I've had in the last like 18 months is just, or 18 to, I guess we're going on 2.5 years. So, it's been pretty amazing. So, not to say that it's for everybody. I think it's really not. But for me, it's been
That's
incredible.
Awesome, man. Well, and just seeing the way you approach things and like being a student of the game, that pays you dividends later, So you can avoid those mistakes when you are 3 to 5,
For sure.
6, 7 million, so
I'm ready to stamp him inspired, Patrick.
inspired. Call it.
It's really neat to see what you've done, Jameson. Like I like the business you've built, and I like how you've got a vision how this is going to dovetail into other opportunities for you in this space. And you don't necessarily have it all figured out and this master plan, but you've got several good options emerging here to kind of keep growing and stabilize your company, add additional revenue streams to your company, potentially more locations in the future, and then these ancillary offshoots that are coming out of the stuff you're learning for your company that could benefit other players here. And so West Coast Dex seems like this kind of central thing that can empower, it's self-sustaining, it's growing, and it can empower these other opportunities for you, and you're having a good time. So, I mean, that's awesome, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. I think that you're a neat example of someone that is, in a way, flying by the seat of your pants, but in another way, you're just flowing with opportunities as they present themselves, and you're making sure you handle the fundamentals well. We've had a few guests lately that have just been knocking it out of the park the same way. They're very humble with like what they're doing, because they don't feel like they orchestrated it all, from some master plan, but you're building a great business and you're going to create more and more options for yourself as you go. And I'm really excited to see where this evolves. I think it'd be cool to have you back maybe in a year or two and just see like where you've come in that time, because you're this really interesting spot right now, where I feel like you're really climbing this growth curve, and you're also going to be evolving quite a bit over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to come back. I think, and thanks for the kind words. I mean, I do. It is a lot of times you feel like you jump out of the airplane and you assemble your parachute on the way down, and you need proof points to sort of. I mean, look again. I love what I do. It is very emotionally harrowing, I guess, is the experience. Like going from 0 to 1, and you see this online, like, oh gosh, like it's so hard. And like, and I should write more about this, but like I could tell you exactly what those hards are, right? It's like not having enough cash to like pay X, Y, and Z all the time. And that's different every week, but it just repeats. It's Groundhog Day. And it is helpful from an emotional, like looking to sort of say like, oh, I do have this CAGR. We are growing. Like we do, this is what this looks like. And that's what a year from now, and now I have enough rearward looking evidence to sort of say like, oh, I just keep chopping wood, carry water, keep chopping wood, carry water, we'll get there. So, but there are a lot of like dark nights in the early days where you don't have the evidence to look back at, right? To know that you'll get there. But I feel very fortunate to be now in a place where I can say like, oh,
yeah, this
is going to work. So,
that's awesome, man. So
yeah,
this has been really fun, and can definitely see your flywheel cranking here. So if people want to connect with you online, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, I'm very online. Hit me up on Twitter. It's just Jameson Haslam, my full name. west.coast.deck on Instagram. You can see a lot of our fun. We do a lot of really cool, fun social media stuff. But yeah, Twitter is the easiest way to find me.
Awesome. We'll link to that in the show notes. So thank you for coming on, and keep cranking, man. And we'll be in touch here soon.